Happy Halloween and welcome back to Dagon. We have one lost DLC thing I need to look at. I don't know what it is. Steam doesn't tell me what it is. Or I haven't looked it up really. Oh! Never. Oh! Oh! This is not a game. It's a. This is not a game. It's a. It's extra feature, like it's like art thing, and there's something like soundtrack, and it says audiobooks there and stuff like that. Okay, so then we have to can go and look for the trivia stuff. Okay, I'm just gonna skip. I'm gonna read all the trivia stuff, and I know what's happening, so I'm just gonna go through this thing as quick as I can.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
There's the first one. Lovecraft letters. As two letters... Oh! I got an achievement. Okay. As two letters... As the letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easy and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolar expression is with me largely replacing conversation. As my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute, I cannot bear to talk much now, and I'm becoming as silent as the spectator himself. My low quality extends itself on paper. Lovecraft power. Throughout his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10% survived to this day. But his tendency to endless correspondence was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing. Thanking anybody for a present was so much as an ordeal that I could rather have written a 250-line pastoral or 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence has been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. Okay.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and World War I, 1914 to 1918. It was also sold without restriction until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Frederick Turner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium after the Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. I do remember this game, so I'm not gonna...
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War One. Lovecraft was actively interested in this curse. Of course, he composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolded in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleine. Some time ago, impressed by my entry uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment, despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I should soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet, a piece of sharpness, could more conclusively dispose of me. Was he suicidal? Not good. Let's learn that. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. Okay. He was not. Oh no. Okay, he was. Okay, so he passed the exam, but she didn't want him to die. Okay, she didn't want her son to go into war and die. Okay. She has threatened to go to any length, legally and otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I'm Providence. The life and times of H.P. Lovecraft, S.T. Joshi. Okay. I sometimes forget to comment on some of them because I have already seen some of them. Shit! I don't remember this part. I forgot about the Bang Bang.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
There we go. The Huns. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as a brutal, deadly warriors and master of quick raids, who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War One, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for German in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave a speech to his troops on the 20th July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should we encounter the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. No prison will not be taken. However, falls into our hands is for fight just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that only today makes them seem mighty in history, legend, and made a name mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at the German. The refusal to take in prisoners was clear. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and custom of war adopted during the first Haju Convention of 1899. Yeah, I remember this part. Let's continue. Oh yeah, we escaped.
Liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Hey.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
There we go. Was it any gay?
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
Ooh. The Return of the Short Stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduce an element from the Cthulhu mythos, Dagon itself. A pagan cult worshipping Dagon later appears in The Shadow of Over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. Oh, I heard of that one. 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a story about Yorvas Dudley, a daydreamer who discovered a mysterious mausoleum in the woods of his house and became obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short story writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Lovecraft stated that his friend Liam Paul Hook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again. Okay, so he tried short stories, didn't like it, and then he was convinced to do it again. Okay.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Oh yeah, I'm not scared because I do remember this part, but it was real freaking for a time. Oh, the stillness!
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
The origin of Dagon, eh? Dagon seemed to be inspired by a fish head, a short story novel by Ivrin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between the hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horrors in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze of that covered the surface. I dreamt that the whole hideous done that whole hideous scroll, and I can yet feel the ooze sucking me down in defense of Dagon. This is B. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his word, I hated fish and feared the sea, and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what early experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. Dwelling in darkness. Lovecraft 1970 blah blah blah. Oh, that's his friend! Yeah. A fish can be nasty. Ooh, let's go to the boat. I think we're gonna sleep here.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might.
Okay, that's a big one. I didn't see the big one before. I don't remember that thing.
Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
The thing is moving. I don't remember that thing moving. I don't remember that giant thing that make it wiggly. Oh, there's another trivia. The Mysteries of Volcanic Island. A volcanic eruption sometimes result in the creation of islands. Most of them are transcended and endured after some time, but some prove permanent. The floating pumice porous rock created when superheated pressure rock is ejected from the volcano can move across long distance and transport barnacles and macroalgae that cling onto it. In 2001, rafts of pumice created during the eruption of a volcano near Tonga, Polynesia, eventually reached Australia. Okay. You can read the discovery on the show. You can read the discovery immediately or go back to them later in the main menu. Turn this blah blah blah, okay? Okay, where to continue?
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
Okay.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
What the hell are these things? I'm so concerned. What the heck? What in the alien is this? Is this what we call? Are they supposed to be crabs? spiders. I know that that's a big well. That's the only confident thing in this place. Is a whale. I know I shouldn't.
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
Another trivia. The horrors of the ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu mythos and the fictional underwater city of Arley was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today we know that the darkest depths of ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 60,000 feet below the ocean surface. In never-ending darkness and at hellishly crust pressure, hundreds of times stronger than the sounds at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep creatures such as the anglerfish and the fangtooth and the viperfish and their truly Lovecraftian characteristic, it's hardly not to find some irony in this. Maybe he knew something he didn't know.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface.
Shit, I spilled on myself.
Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill.
Yeah, I like to drink when I play, especially in this heat, even though it's not that heat today, which is good.
I know not why my dreams were so wild that night. But ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
New trivia. The loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not even a frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He was considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. However, he would often meet with friends in his apartment and at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive his works could suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York's cafeterias, and they resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visibly on the ground and piles of papers scattered across the floor. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't blame him.
That the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror
I judge him.
But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent, whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and character notes, The Shadow Out of Time, The Hunter of the Dark, Islands Emerge from the Ocean, The Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies. Me go on the Whisper in Darkness. It also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also concluded in a manner similar to Dagon but let's skip the details in order to not spoil the ending. Okay.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
The Piltdown man. Lovecraft would often use the latest scientific discoveries as an inspiration for his work. He would even update his stories at the last moment in order to make sure they reflect the last breakthroughs. Unfortunately, this method is not without its faults. After Lovecraft's death, the Piltdown man discovery mentioned in Dagon turned into be a paleoanthropical fraud. In 1912, Charles Dawson, an amateur archaeologist, announced that he had discovered a missing link between ape and man, the fossilized remains of previous unknown early human. Years later, they turned out to be forgery, but by the point the fraud had already managed to negatively affect the early research in human evolution. In the year when the discovery took place, the majority of the scientific community believed Dawson indeed found the missing link. In 1953, Time magazine published evidence proving that Dawson was a con man. It turned out that the fossils of the previously unknown early human consisted of a human skull, the jaw of an orangutan, and chimpanzee teeth. Oh! Okay. Some fraud. They did. Yeah, they did fraud and
this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist. I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters.
Oh, I swear. Shit. Oh.
Loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
I do remember that giant fishman jumping, but I got scared by the noise. I easily jump.
I have
it's raining.
indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat.
Ah, it's raining, it's so hot. This day it's finally raining.
At any rate, I know that I heard girls
Okay.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Oh, there is a trivia thing. The atheist. Lovecraft considered himself an atheist, an absolute materialist, which he attributed partly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science. Science in general, in his own words. Okay. I guess he doesn't mean materialist as in that... What does he mean with materialist? That is... Okay. I am indeed... Let's see what he said. I am indeed an absolute materialist, so far as actual beliefs goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of supernaturalism, religion, spiritualism, and transcendentalism, metempsychosis, or immortality. All I say is that I think it's a damn unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an internal survival personality exist. They are most preposterous and unjustified of all the guesses which can be made about the universe, and I am not enough of a hair-splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as errant or neglectable sunshine. In theory, I am an agnostic, but pending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed particularly and provisionally as an atheist. Okay, so I guess he means materialist in a way that he believes in things that you can see in the absolute, as if you has to see it with your own eyes, so like physical, like you have to prove the thing to be exist. Something not the materialist that he's like to shop, like shopping, have a lot of stuff. Okay, all the sources, blah blah blah. Okay. There's no trivia. The journalist. Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticism to heart, which resulted in his decision on stepping away from writing poetry and concentrated on weird fiction again for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, was one of the short stories written during that period. In this excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude toward warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the Conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments and at the proper time take advantage of the more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in the wild career on conquest against unarmed victims. One country is or even can be more above No country is or even can be above warfare until the basic impulse of the human animal have miraculously changed. Yes, he believed that war would have... this is saying in Fallout 2. I think I said it last time I read this. War War never changes. Oh, there we are. In Defense of Dagon. In 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays. The Descendant propends, The Defense Remain Open, and The Final Words. The published as a collective title In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebucked a series of criticism directed at his works. Some notable quotes. I paint what I dream. I will let the public settle the rest among themselves. Mr. Monday asked the raison d'etre of Dagon. I will give it. Purely, simply reproduce a mood. It's object to the simplest in all art. Portrayal. The physical horror of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing in the entire difference between realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities. In the essay, Lovecraft touched upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and love of science.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Dagon was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East, and as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as a judge of the dead in the Assyrian poem and the underworld prison murdered in one of the Babylonian texts. Is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name. As in the Hebrew of the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's words, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones. A humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the ocean. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
You couldn't figure out what the fish thing was because people didn't want to search into it. Okay. Oh. What is the marketer? Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by an advice he received from friends, among others. He started freelancing for marketing magazine, where he would write announcements and commercial. Feel free to judge his copyright skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and this cleverest contrivance of built-in and permanent furniture, such as bookcases, dresses, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripped scholarship, and mellow West craftsmanship which an energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform richly to the archaeologists of each particular type of home. The cost-considered quality is amazingly low, and the trademark in the individual prices prevents any substitution of careless contractors. Lovecraft studied 117 blah blah blah. Okay. August Derleth and the Cthulhu Mythos. August Derleth was an American writer and an anthologist, yeah, He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his work through his company, Arkham House. I like that it makes me think of Arkham Asylum, even though Arkham Asylum is inspired by the name Arkham Day is taken from Lovecraft. Although it greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's work after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of the most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Dethen was devoted Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's work was often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Deltreth after the author left the mortal plane. Okay. Look at that. The scientist. These days, the word scientist is a well-accepted term, but at the time the Dagon was published, it was subject to a wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that the man of science was more appropriate term for the employee. He attempted in the defense of Dagon that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and the early 20th century, scientific research in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that man of science resembled the term man of letters was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was a gender-specific indicated that science was an enduring pursued by only one sex. Sexist much? The term scientist became more acceptable only after the World War II, and the man of science started to fade into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. Yeah. Oh, we're soon at the end. We are at the end.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Lovecraft and tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12, in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friends, Reinhard Klein, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Cecily Brown dated 13th February 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to. I have a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or corroscent the delicate nature equipoise of the evolved human imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let them do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition, the prohibition of anyone antisocial force as well as of any other. Okay. There's another one. Elder Sign. Oh, final. I found all of them. Yes, we can finish the game. At another house, there were people Where people were staring, he asked questions about the gods and whether they danced often upon Larian. But the farmer and his wife would only make the elder sign and tell him the way to near and ultra. The dream quest on the elder sign is a protective symbol that can be found in various works of pop culture. Usually represented by a 5-pointed star with an eye flame symbol in its center. For example, in games inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's writing, it's supposed to ward away all kinds of cosmic horrors. However, this also later version is a sign created by the author's friend, White August Lerath. In our game, we have used the original symbol as designed by Lovecraft in the form of a 6-pointed branch, which is sometimes included in letters to his friends. Oh! So that's the thing. That's why we have branches. Cool.
Often,
But
I
now we
ask
have the end of
myself
game.
if it could not all have been a pure phantasm. A mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed.
I wonder what Lovecraft would say if he lived today and discovered that, hey, some of the creatures you made in your books actually exist. Like, they do exist, creatures that you made, like the weird...
Worshipping
But
their
they're
ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
Bye-bye. I think he died. That was Dagon. The last one was the last video of this series was a little longer one because I wanted to collect all the trivia stuff. But yeah, that was Dagon. The game is over. I played through the game. Yeah. I have collected all the trivia stuff. Yeah, that was Dagon. If you like what you saw, please give me a like and a comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to get notified. I hope you have a lovely Halloween. I hope you liked it. I hope you had fun. I hope you didn't get too scared, even though this game isn't that scary, it's more creepy. But yeah. Please tell me, what other games do you want me to play next Halloween, next year? What type of spooky game or creepy game do you want to do you like to see? Also, tell me what other games you want to see on the channel in general or in other specials. Like, what do you want for Easter? What do you want for Christmas? Anyway, I hope you like what you saw, and I see you in the next episode and in another series. Anyway, have a great great day and great night, great evening, whatever, and also happy Halloween. Bye bye. Oh, what was that? I think it was just dust or something. Anyway, bye bye.